All right, we're going to do something really different now. And my favorite subject in school was history. And I love history. And of course, when you realize that God wrote everything before it happened, you realize, history is his story, right? And it really is. And I know, we hear people say that. And I wonder if they really believe that God wrote everything back there and everything right now and in the future. But so I'm not from Pennsylvania. I'm from Virginia. So I'm not talking about this because I have some affinity to Pennsylvania or to Pittsburgh. But Pittsburgh has, the more I've learned truth over the years, people from Pittsburgh would always pop up who were authors. In fact, we publish a lot of books from people who had a former connection to Pittsburgh. And I'm talking about reprints. And I became very fascinated with the history of Pittsburgh. And so we're going to just go. Now, listen, I'm pretty sure I won't get through all these slides. We got lots of pictures and stories to tell. And I don't know how long it would take me. We're just going to, when our time's done, we're just going to stop. And if we have some time tomorrow that didn't get filled, I'll finish the story or we'll just finish it online somewhere. But anyway, so what we're going to do is just we're here in the Pittsburgh area. So I thought, what a great time for me to tell the story. I love to talk about what happened here in Pittsburgh. It's really remarkable. And I'm going to tell you this, and I'm not trying to over-exaggerate. Probably none of us would be in this room without the story that I'm getting ready to tell you. And because I find out that there's a connection in almost everything I believe that somehow leads back to Pittsburgh, which is it's phenomenal. And one of the things I'm looking forward to, and this is losing my time saying this, but one of the things I love to do when I relax is to hear history and hear stories, and I even love when people make up stories, and I love dramas and so forth, but God's the one who made up the stories, right? And I think out in eternity, I think we're going to learn all the stories of the past. I don't think they were just used on the people who lived them. I think we're going to learn everybody's stories in living color.
I want to hear my great.
Won't that be awesome?
Yeah.
And Sheridan Teller is the storyteller of our current time, but God's the great storyteller. And we're gonna watch the series. It's going to be awesome. But anyway, we're gonna go back. I'm going to just go back 10 years ago and honor Willie Slaughter. Willie Slaughter died a few years ago, and he was a really dear brother. And exactly 10 years ago, I was in Pittsburgh, in Homeland, and he was from. Sorry about that. He was from. Anyway, and he's from Pittsburgh, and he had a passion for Pauline truth and for right division, and he had me come and teach a seminar on the basis of right division, and I did that. I just want to give a little nod to Willie. So here we go, wrong direction. All right, then we're going to go back 150 years ago, and 150 years ago, this little piece of land that has three rivers. It was a strategic place because it did have three rivers, which was a great passageway to move goods. And it had probably the best coal and iron deposits in the United States. And it was a great place to manufacture steel. And it was the steel city. And at one point, it was the 8th largest city in the United States. And it was a very big industrial hub. And
Clyde, on that picture,
yes,
on the right-hand side, just so you all know, that's the Ohio River going up to
yes.
where we're at right now. There's 16 miles on the right-hand side of that river. Until the 80s, there were 16 miles of steel mills on that river.
And I'm going to tell you about one of them.
Oh, cool.
Because one of them is our spiritual history, believe it or not.
Oh, cool.
And So anyway, if I can learn which direction to move this. So to step back further, we need to understand that something happened in the 1800s that we could easily call the Second Reformation. You know, we know Martin Luther and the other reformers from prior, but in the 1800s there was this great movement away from denominations and away from organized religion, and that people began to study the scriptures for themselves. They began to independently study and reject the clergy laity class and look and seek for literal interpretations of scripture. And advances were made in the 1800s in right division and the clarity concerning the state of the dead and the myth of hell and universal reconciliation and the refutation of the Trinity and the production of literal Bible translation and widespread literature. There was just this movement through the 1800s away from organized religion and people hungry for the truth and trying to get, they knew the theology that they had and the doctrine they had just didn't make any sense. And these people are really important. And this movement was very important. And without this movement, we just wouldn't even be here. You wouldn't know these truths. I don't mean even just in this building, but you wouldn't be where you are in your walk without these people. And they were called, the movement was called by a lot of names: the Recovery Reformation and the Restoration Movement, the Age to Come Believers, and the Christadelphians, and Bible students, and Universalists, and Unitarians. But then in the broad picture, outside of Pittsburgh, we're going to think broader at this moment. And in Europe, you had this group of men right here, and they were significant. And if you look over this list of names, maybe you recognize a few. But whether you recognize a few of these names or not, you probably would not have the understanding you would have without these men. And we publish books by every one of these people and have them in print and keep them in print. And then in the United States, we had a handful of men that made a dramatic, and if we could talk about each one of them and what they did and the impact they had and how they were trailblazers to things that we hold dear, it would just be, and we have books by every one of these people here. And it was very significant. And let me tell you something. If you go back, let's think about ancestry for a minute. If you go back, and this is just fun ancestry stuff, because that's another thing I love. Well, it's related to history, right? I love ancestry, and it's cool. If you go back 20 generations, and a generation could be as little as 20 years. Ancestral, as people who study ancestry usually have it at about 25 years. And if you go back 20 generations, put you in the 1500s. And every one of us in this room at the 20th generation spot would have 1 million grandparents in 20 generations. It's 2 to the power of 20.
Wow.
And that's just at the 20th level. And if it's everybody in between, all your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and it keeps going back, you'd have 2 million parents and grandparents back into the 1500s. And it took every one of them for you to get here. And you take one of those people out of your history.
Yeah. And they had to meet at just the right time.
And you're gone. You're not here. The probability of you being here is less than 0. Because not only did all these people have to be there for us to be here, but they had to meet, right? They had to have relations at the right night, the right time, and the right sperm out of all of them had to get there by 2 million people in 2 million experiences. Wow. And you take one of them out of the equation and we're just not here. You want to talk about the sovereignty of God. You want to talk about God writing a story. But think about spiritual ancestry. We all have people who were instrumental. We didn't just sit in a locked room, open a Bible, and come to believe all the things we believe. We had fathers, spiritual mothers. And actually, we have more spiritual fathers and mothers than we do physical ancestors. Because I got spiritual fathers, multiple of them, who taught me things about right division. Different spiritual fathers who taught me things about the salvation of all, who taught me the things about the sovereignty of God. And you take any of these people out of my equation, and I don't hold the truths I hold. This is why these things, that's why I say we're honoring his story here. Now, we're going to talk about the spiritual ancestry of Pittsburgh. Here is 7 men. And don't be alarmed if you don't know any of their names. If we went back into the 1800s and I put up here a list of all your grandparents from the 1800s, I wonder if you'd, if I just, hey, and maybe that's what maybe I picked one of you and pulled a trick and these are your great grandfather. You know what I'm saying? How many would you recognize? Does it mean they're not important? And it doesn't mean you don't really know them, because you really do. And every one of these people here, and by the way, I think it's 4 out of the 7 we published their material, some of their materials, and very significant. And the first man that I want to show you and talk to you about is William Connolly. I don't know if you ever heard of William Connolly. And actually, he's a very historical figure in Pittsburgh. And he was one of the original Pittsburgh Steelers, because he was a Pittsburgh steel industrialist.
Oh, he wasn't a quarterback?
And I'll show you in a minute his operation. He had a steel manufacturing plant on the Ohio River. And anyway, fascinating man. But here's what I'll tell you: if we could go back to 1870, you and I are fellowshipping here at the hotel, whatever this hotel is, but in Beaver Falls. But if we believe a lot of the things that we still believe, and we were alive in 1870, we might go to his house. And he called it Bethel, the house of God. He didn't go to church. Originally, he was a Lutheran. But he got swept into this movement and became a part of it. Independent study of the scriptures. He come to see and understand that the dead are dead and that there is no such thing as hell. He come to see that the Trinity was a myth. These are unbelievable truths that they came to see, and he was a part of that. And he was directly tied into people that we know or would know eventually. And he had regular studies in his home, and people would come and study. He would hold conferences in his home, and these truths were taught. They began to dabble into the larger hope, and perhaps that the dead are dead and there is no hell, but it might look like that God is so gracious that everyone's going to be saved. And some of them who were in these studies went to advance the truth of universal reconciliation. And everything we learned about him and Sarah, is that they were very kind people and very loving people, and that they were very embracing. And they opened up their homes not only for meetings, but they housed people. They especially housed teachers, and teachers who had lost their pastorate and lost their ministries or the things they believed. They could come here for a refuge until they could get back on their feet. And he would house itinerant teachers who would go through. He even housed one man who came to see these great truths and took care of him in his death process. We know at least one that he did this. And just what a very gracious and benevolent man he was He was born in Pittsburgh. He died in Pittsburgh. His grave is here in Pittsburgh. And but a man that would have fit really well in here, and but also was very embracing of people who were seeing things differently, and he was very teachable and loved to share the truth. This is his manufacturing plant. He owned it. Him and a man named Ritter, of course, owned it, and maybe we'll see it. Actually, I think this might have. Well, anyway, but this is it, and he eventually bought Ritter out. He eventually sold his manufacturing business to Bethlehem Steel, and he had a home on Millionaire Row in Pittsburgh, large 12,000 square foot home, and that home was a home that he dedicated to truth and to the study of truth. He also established the Third National Bank of Allegheny. So very powerful, wealthy man. Here's something very interesting, though, about movements and about when people realize truth, and then there's a cycle of that truth. And it usually starts with a man who sees something from God, and he has a message, and he teaches that message, and then there's some momentum builds, and a movement starts. And here's what you need to understand about Conley. And if you'll read his name, you'll see a lot of people who will connect him to their spiritual history, because this movement went a lot of different ways. And anytime there's a movement, there's a lot of power seekers and people who are looking to gain notoriety and take over. And this movement went all kinds of different directions and splintered. But anyway, a movement started, and then after a while, it becomes a machine, and it's just involved in maintaining the things that were being taught. And then after a while, it becomes a monument to the person who taught these things, and no new stuff's going to be learned. We're got a creed now, and then before you know it, it's a morgue, and this is just a dead organization. And most of, a lot of what happened, almost all of what happened during that period, just ended up in deadness. But we are the benefactors of this movement. And the books again, we carry many books from those who were involved in this process. One of the men who was involved in this process, who was from Pittsburgh, Robert Richardson. I love this quote of him. I had it on my office wall for a long time. I switch them out, but it says, for my part, I shall always claim the right of thinking and judging for myself, and of fully and freely expressing my views, whether these correspond with those of others or differ from them. This I conceive to be a high and holy privilege, and its exercise a sacred duty. Oh, okay. I would love to have met him. And he ended up in a Campbellite movement, and he was a medical doctor. I don't think I have his story here, no. But anyway, he went to medical school, and he was a medical doctor here in Pittsburgh. And he eventually taught in university in West Virginia, and also in Kentucky, while still being here, back and forth in Pittsburgh. And anyway, very, very interesting man. Next, we have John Payton. John Payton had a magazine called The World's Hope. And this little line right here, hard to read, says, the whole creation was subjected to vanity and hope and shall be delivered. Right there, the world's hope. You'll see the address, maybe you can't see it, is actually Alma, Michigan, which is actually where the offices of the Concordant Publishing Company are. And he was very foundational in bringing the salvation of all, and he was centered in Almont. But as a young man, he was born and raised a Baptist and was a Baptist preacher, and then he moved to Pittsburgh. because of John Conley and the teachers that were here, and he was drawn to the teaching of the correct teaching of death and the correct teaching of hell. And this is before he began this paper. And then in the process, he began to see this greater hope and the salvation of all. And he was born in Scotland. His father immigrated to Almont, a Baptist minister. He stayed with the Conleys when he was here. He became a co-editor of a magazine that was called the Herald of the Morning. And they were looking forward to the night being gone and the morning coming, you know. And then he became an original contributor to Zion's Watchtower, which was founded in Pittsburgh, which would eventually become the Watchtower organization, which would eventually become in the 1930s the Jehovah's Witnesses, who obviously do have a correct understanding of death, what death is. They have a correct understanding of the non-existence of hell. They have a correct understanding of the Trinity, for instance. And but that, to make a long story short, this movement got hijacked. And it got hijacked and taken from Pittsburgh. It started in Pittsburgh. The magazine started in Pittsburgh, and it got hijacked and moved to New York. And within a few generations, it became this legalistic movement that we would know as the Jehovah's Witnesses. He had a publishing company called the Larger Hope Publishing Company. Oh, his magazine. Oh, he returned to Almont, and there he started this magazine. He had a printing company called Larger Hope Publishing, and he authored The Great Revelation, which we republish, and a great book on the salvation of all. Here's some great quotes from him. Both love and justice will be satisfied when all mankind will be reconciled to God. Is that beautiful? I love that quote. He said, and listen to this quote, no more death. No more death does not merely mean no more dying, but also no more dead ones. For we are assured that death shall be swallowed in victory. Is that beautiful? Oh my goodness, this stuff moves me, you know? And he says the principle is a few are chosen to bless all the others. I thought about that when you were talking about our calling. You know, this is not like that we're some kind of special that we see this stuff, you know, in the sense that people might think what we're saying. But the few are chosen so that we might bless the whole rest of creation. And that'll be coming one day. Then Charles Russell was here. Charles Russell started attending the Conleys Bible studies, and he started learning these things. The Jehovah Witnesses will trace their roots back to him. Sadly, another man came on the scene, Judge Rutherford, and began to take this movement in a whole different direction. But while he was here, Charles would have come to understand so many things that we believe, and started the Watchtower periodical. He also was born in Pittsburgh. He owned a men's clothing store here. We have pictures of that store. They brought in clothes from Manhattan, so he had connections with the rich people in Pittsburgh, and that's where he would have met Conley. He was influenced by the writings of Storrs and Stetson, men who had come to see that the dead are dead and that hell is a myth. And of course attended the class at the home of the Conleys. They would eventually call that class the Allegheny Bible class because it was in Allegheny part of Pittsburgh, and of course began the Watchtower. Here's a great quote from Russell. I think even though the Jehovah's Witnesses would trace their roots back there, I think it's a man we would have enjoyed some great fellowship with. He said, we want no homage, no reverence for ourselves, nor would we have our writings revered or regarded as infallible or on a par with the Holy Scriptures. And we still urge, as in the past, that each reader study the subjects we present in the light of the Scriptures, proving all things by the scriptures, accepting what they see to be thus approved, and reject all else. With the help of Conley, they established the Pittsburgh Bible House. In 1889, a brand new building was built. This was something very common throughout the United States during the latter part of the 1800s. Almost every major city had a Bible house. Baltimore had one, New York City had one, Philadelphia had one, and Conley thought that one should be here. And it was a place that would print and distribute Bibles and Bible study material. The distinction between the Pittsburgh Bible House and the rest is they were printing and distributing literal translations, actual translations that you and I would use that you and I use today, that I rely on. They printed and distributed the emphatic diaglot and Rotherham's emphasized Bibles that instead of eternity have ages, and remove the issues of hell and so forth. So these were being distributed downtown in the business district in this building. And they had many signs on the front windows, and we have pictures of those. This is one of the signs that was there. And they had Bible keys. They printed little leaflets that would be keys to the Bible, concordances, versions, translations, and dictionaries. This is this is a picture of their staff. And this man in particular he was the manager of the house. And so here they would do printing. They would mail all over the world. They had typeset offices and offices to write in. Russell had an office here. They had a kitchen and dining room. The whole second floor was a meeting room that could hold 300 people, which I'll show you. And obviously, to build a building like that, they needed a place to put 300 people. There were living places and accommodations for the staff. Garman, who's is over here, who was the manager of the house, he would move. Listen, a lot of these people would go on to see the salvation of all and leave the Watchtower and leave the Bible house. And many of them ended up becoming associated with Enoch and the Concordant Publishing concern. And Garman helped in translation work. And for decades here in Pittsburgh, he would hold meetings at the YMCA and teach the salvation of all, that death is death and there is no hell, and teach against the Trinity. And he would have loved what we're doing here today, and he would hold those there. And then inside the house, there was a literature. We have pictures. It's cool to have these pictures. So now we know what's in there. We know there's literal translations here. And here's a couple samples again of the literature, the emphatic diaglot, and these are these keys they had. They called them Berean Bible study helps. And so people come in off the street and get this information. Here's the literature production, and here's the mail room. That's Russell in his study. Here's the meeting hall in the Bible house. Okay, we're done. But we will. Let me just say this, and this. So Russell had, in the course of his life, he had 5 personal secretaries, and that's what he called them. And but they were assistants, and they helped him with his ministry. They toured with him worldwide, and taught with him, and just were they were his right hand men, and he had 5 of them. Here's the interesting thing: as the movement would as the movement would deteriorate, all movements deteriorate, you know, and you can just look around the room and know we're not even in a movement, okay, you know, and everything goes in cycles, and it's okay, but we're the benefactors of all the good stuff that came out of this movement. And of these five personal assistants in the process, and after Russell died, there was a big power struggle and a takeover. He had left in his will who would be in charge, and there was a power struggle, and the movement ended up being usurped. And but of the five personal assistances, every one of them left the movement and went independent. The last two men who were his personal assistants, and their stories are fabulous. How I thought I was going to go this story. I thought I might tell the whole story today. We're on slide, well, actually not too bad. His last two assistants left and would end up joining A. Enoch and the Concordant Publishing, and they were involved in translation, and they were involved. Now, and these men were crazy positioned. They had went all over the world with this movement, and they knew everybody. I mean, they were well connected. And then all of a sudden, this other little guy, Enoch, they latch hold of the concordant version and the salvation of all. And they use all these connections they had. These are men who taught all the major cities in the United States, large groups of people under something called the International Bible Study Association. And these men would all leave. This man has a great story. We print, I think, 3 of his books. One of my favorite is The Church Which Is His Body and The Lamb's Wife. Beautiful book. He was originally, but anyway, we won't go into all that. But great man. He's the one he ended up in federal prison in World War I for his view of the government and military, and spent time in federal prison. And then after he got out, then he latched on and helped Knock. And then Sturgeon, who was Russell's last assistant, and was with him on his final tour of teaching, and was with him and cared for him as he was sick and as he died. And who actually, Robeson actually was in the will, was in Russell's will to take over as one of the 4 men maybe, to take over, and he did for a while, and he resigned, and went independent. And I'll tell you more about that when we pick, probably won't be this weekend, but the story goes on, and it's a moving story. And these are our kind of people. And it all went away. Really, it all went away eventually, but it didn't, because we reprint their books, and we reprint their articles, and we stand where they stand in different circumstances, in different environment. And we're thankful for our heritage. And again, without these men and their promotion of literal translations and their constant zeal to get this message everywhere possible, it's that domino effect, that you begin to talk to somebody, and then they have a root with somebody who has a root with somebody, and finally you find out, wow, it's back here. All right.